we're going to have a couple of little announcements before Maureen gets started, and afterwards there will be time for questions and comments, and we will take the microphone around so people can hear what you say. People can hear what you say. First one, I guess most of you know that Joe Muskoff, who's been the chair of the resident readers for years and has been doing it all by herself, has retired as chairman, so I will be chair full-time now. So you'll be expecting. Also, we've been having some complaints about not being able to hear, even though people are being microphoned. If your hearing aids are set up to use the telecoil, check your hearing aids, and if you're not set up for that, check with your audiologist, because it makes all the difference in the world. The sound sometimes might hear muffled, or you might hear it being muffled or out of focus, for instance, like a picture is out of focus, and once it comes into focus, it's bright and clear, and that's how the sound comes across if you do have the telecoils. So check with your audiologist if you don't have it. The Forest has the telecoil in this room, in the party room, and now in the Forest room in the terraces. So it makes a lot of difference, I can tell you from personal experience. And next week, Lynn Featherstone will be reading a Halloween special. So we hope that you'll come back and bring friends.
Good afternoon. I'm Maureen Johnson, and the theme of my readings today is resilience. But the readings will be a rather wide variety of examples of resilience. The first one is a short story by Jack London, and you may remember Call of the Wild or White Fang. He wrote 23 novels, 3 memoirs, over 50 short stories, plus plays and poetry before his death at 40 years of age. He was an innovator of science fiction, and I recently read Star Rover, which I don't think is well known. It was out of print for quite a while, definitely one of the science fiction variety. It consists of short stories bound by one protagonist throughout, and he wrote it as an expose of the terrible prison conditions at San Quentin. So it's Star Rover, if you are interested. It is in print now, and I would recommend it. It's quite brilliantly creative, I would say. So today I'm going to read Pluck and Pertinacity, and I will try to pronounce pertinacity. I've been practicing. So. Pluck and Personality. To P.T. Barnum is accorded the coinage of the term stick-to-itiveness, a strong synonym for pertinacity. Now, he who possesses pertinacity must also possess pluck, another important element in the achievement of success. A man devoid of this cannot be pertinacious. His resolution melts away in the face of obstacles which require pluck to overcome. The following story of unyielding adherence to purpose, performed under almost unthinkable hardships and dangers, is a true one, for I was personally aware of most of the facts concerned. Some of the incidents, however, were given to me by a surgeon traveling into the Yukon country with a detachment of Northwest Mounted Police, and still others I obtained from the white trader in charge of the 60-mile post. You know, the roads up in the Northwest Territory are labeled by mileposts. so this was a 60-mile post. The story is of a man who practically achieved the impossible in his hazardous ice journey in the dead of Arctic winter. Happily, success crowned the effort. In the fall of 1897, the cry of famine went up from the hungry town of Dawson. Faint-hearted miners turned their backs on the golden lure. Partners with food for but one drew straws to ascertain which should remain and which should go. Canadian citizens and American aliens appealed to their respective governments for aid. In October, with the last water, which was composed chiefly of running ice, a hungry exodus went down the river to Fort Yukon. Then the price of dogs went up to $300 and dog food to $1 a pound. Flour was not to be had at $150 per hundredweight. In November, with the first ice, another stampeded crowd hurried up the river to civilization and safety. This scare, which so greatly diminished the number of empty mouths, was all that saved Dawson from a bitter winter. As it was, the gold seekers managed to punch through, but those that fled in the height of panic carried a terrible tale of them to salt water. After that winter settled down, all communication ceased. For many faces turned south on the dismal 1,000 miles of trail, there was one that held unerringly to the north. It belonged to a Dutchman who knew little English and spoke less. His equipment was more meager than that of those who passed him, and he was heading into the heart of the famine while they were running away from it. He had barely food enough to last himself and the dog to Dawson. He had a dog, a bulldog, the short hair of which made it the worst possible choice of a sledge animal in that frosty land. The refugees looked at his outfit and laughed. By eloquent signs, for misery speaks a common tongue, they explained the lack of food. When that didn't startle him, they painted lurid pictures of starvation and death. But he always remained unperturbed. Then they ceased their grim mirth and pleaded and entreated him to go back. But invariably, he pressed on. Why not? He had started to go to the Klondike, and he certainly was going there. True, he had already tried the Stikine route and lost his outfit and 3 comrades in its treacherous waters. True, he had then gone to St. Michael's, only to get there when the Yukon had frozen and to escape on the last vessel before the Bering Sea closed. True, his money was gone, and he had but a few weeks' food. All true. But it was also true that he had left a wife and children in the states below, and he must send yellow dust of the north to them before another year had passed. And yet again, the real stamp of the man, he had started to go to the Klondike, and he was going there. For the 3rd time he had ventured it, this time over the dreaded Chilkoot Pass in mid-winter. After untold hardship, he arrived at the Big Salmon River, 250 miles from the Chilkoot, and an equal distance from Dawson. At that point, he encountered a squad of mounted police of the Northwest Territories. They had strict orders to allow no one to pass who did not possess 1,000 pounds of provisions. He had barely 50 pounds. He was turned back. One of the police, who understood his language, explained the terrible conditions of affairs. All others whom they had turned back had retraced their steps cheerfully, But this man was not made of such metal. Twice nature had conspired to thwart him, and then, when the trip was half completed, came man. However, he ostensibly started back. But that night, he broke a trail through the deep snow and crossed the river, regaining the traveled trail far below the encampment. The next heard of him was at Little Salmon River, when another detachment of police saw an exhausted man and a bulldog limping painfully down the river. They thought the upper camp had passed them on, so without suspicion, they cordially invited him to their fire to rest and warm up. But he was afraid and hobbled on. The thermometer had gone down then steadily, remained at 50 and 60 degrees below zero. I can't believe that, but that's what he wrote. Equivalent to 80 and 90 degrees of frost. The Dutchman had frozen one of his feet, but still pressed on. He passed fleeing men, young men with frozen limbs or scurvy-rotted flesh, terrible wrecks of the country. But day by day, rigidly adhering to his object, he plodded into the north. At Fort Selkirk, he was forced to lay up, his frozen foot having become so bad he could no longer travel. But he had been there only 2 days when the surgeon from Big Salmon River arrived. He had sledded 100 miles down the river with a government dog team to amputate the limbs of an unfortunate young man who had been trying to get out of the land. After that, the surgeon had gone on to Fort Selkirk, where he expected to wait until the incoming police picked him up. He recognized the Dutchman and dressed his foot, the flesh of which had begun to slough off, leaving a raw and festered hole in the sole of his foot almost large enough to thrust one's fist into. He happened to explain by signs that he was headed down the river to Dawson. He happened to explain by signs that he was awaiting the coming of the police. That was enough for the sufferer. The police were coming. They would send him back. He cut up a blanket and made a gigantic moccasin, folding thicknesses upon thicknesses till it was the size of a water bucket. That night, he and his bulldog headed down the river to Dawson, 175 miles away. The exquisite pain the man must have endured from the cold, the toil, the lack of food, and the injured foot can only be conjectured. And if it was not as if he had comrades, for he had suffered alone and ran the dangers of the ice journey without help in case of accident. At Stewart River, he was almost gone, but his persistence and indomitability seemed limitless. The fear that the police would capture him and send him back down on, and he was the kind of man that did not know the meaning of the word failure. As it was, the police, with their fine trail equipment of dogs and sleds, never did succeed in overtaking him. At 60 miles, it seemed that he must at last succumb, for the dog had finally become exhausted, as had also the supply of food. But the white trader at that point bought the dog for $200 and sufficient food to last the man into Dawson, then only 50 miles away. Barely had he reached his goal when he was sawing wood at $15 a day and slowly but surely curing his foot that he might go prospecting. It is no easy task to work all day in the open in such frosty clime, but he worked steadily through the winter while other men idled in their cabins and cursed their ill luck and the country in general. Not only did he manage to earn subsistence, but he got himself a miner's outfit and also sent out a snug portion of his earnings to his wife and children down in the States. In the spring, While the majority of the gold seekers were preparing to shake the dust of the country from their moccasins, he took part in the stampede to the French Hill benches. A little later, those that passed his claim might have seen a contented man busily engaged in washing out a satisfactory amount of gold each day. There can be no better way to conclude this narrative of unyielding adherence to purpose than by stating that one of the first things he did was to hunt up the 60-mile trader and buy back the bulldog that had been his comrade of his hardships and sufferings. Whoops, is that still working? I bumped it. And if I don't stop it, I'm going to bump it again. A contemporary of Jack London. Jack London, incidentally, lived from 1876 to 1916. And Robert Service, whose poem I'll read next, lived from 1874 to 1978. Both were fascinated with the struggles of gold miners in the snowy Northlands and all the stories that came back. His poetry became very popular, enabling him to spend the latter part of his life on the French Riviera. I guess he earned it. So, Robert Service. You've probably heard of this poem too, at least the first few lines. The Cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who maul for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The Northern Lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Labarge. I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell. Though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. On Christmas Day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold. Through the parka's fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes would close, then the lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed and the stars o'erhead were dancing heel and toe, he turned to me, and Cap, he says, I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking that you won't refuse my last request. Well, he seemed so low that I couldn't say no. Then he says with a sort of moan, it's a cursed cold and it's got right hold till I'm chilled clean through to the bone. Yet 'tain't being dead, it's my awful dread of the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that foul or fair, you'll cremate my last remains. A pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail. And we started on at the streak of dawn, but God, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee. And before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried, horror-driven, with a corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, you may tax your brawn and brains, but you promised true, and it's up to you to cremate those last remains. Now, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were dumb, in my heart I cursed that load. In the long, long night by the lone firelight, while the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows. Oh God, how I loathed that thing. And every day that quiet clay seemed to heavier and heavier grow. And on I went though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I'd often sing to the hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin, till I came to the marge of Lake Labarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw in a trice it was called the Alice May. And I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum. Then here, said I with a sudden cry, is my crematorium. Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found was lying around, and I heaped the fuel higher. The flames just soared, and the furnace roared, such a blaze you seldom see. I buried a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. And the heavens scowled, and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. And it was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. And the greasy smoke and the inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear. But the stars came out, and they danced about ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, I'll just peep inside. I guess he's cooked, and it's time I looked. Then the door I opened wide, and there sat Sam looking cool and calm in the heart of the furnace roar, and he wore a smile you could see a mile, and he said, please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you'll let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plumtree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who mold for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen strange sights, but the queerest they ever did see was the night on the marge of Lake Labarge. I cremated Sam McGee. And now an essay by Crystal Oliver. It's from the Echo Theo Review. And Crystal's a senior lecturer of English at St. Mary's College in Maryland. And she's received many rewards for creative writing and music composition. And actually, as I read this, is when I got the idea of maybe using a theme of resilience. Resilience means we can face the storm, yes, but it's also about recognizing our limits, knowing when to seek shelter and take cover, whether for a moment of rest or for a longer period of recovery. True resilience involves the wisdom to return when the time is right, renewed and strengthened, like the speaker in Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, welling and swelling, ready to bear the tide. However, this individual capacity for renewal is deeply intertwined with a broader understanding of resilience, one that recognizes the interconnectedness of all living things with the divine. It's about recognizing that we are not isolated beings. We arise in dependence on each other, flora, fauna, the sacred, and the celestial. When we recognize that all things are in a constant state of flux, from the earth we touch to the hearts we cannot, we can approach change with greater equanimity and empathy. Perhaps, too, we can find resilience in the constant renewal of the earth and faith in each other, finding the strength to rise again and again. How do we find our place within this complexity? How do we reconcile the individual purpose with the harmony and dissonance of the world around us? How do we navigate the ever-shifting cycles of change that permeate our lives, whether they be ecological, spiritual, political, or personal, to cultivate the awareness and equanimity needed to navigate these cycles with resilience? These are the questions that we, like the speaker in Angelo's poem, must confront with courage and determination, rising to meet them with our full selves. And now I'll read the Mary Angelou poem that she referenced, Shall I Rise? Maya Angelou lived from 1928 to 2014, and many of us have heard her read her poetry. She wrote 7 memoirs, poetry, books of essays, plays, movies, and TV shows. Maybe her best known memoir was I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Still I rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness. But still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meetings of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide. Welling and swelling, I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear. I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise. I rise. I rise. Thank you.
Any comments, questions?
I sat under a tree with Maya Angelou, and she taught those of us who were there how to write a 17-syllable poem.
17 syllables.
Yeah, which is a, what do we call it? What's this? Yeah, haiku.
Oh, haiku.
She was a professor at Winston-Salem State. No, she's a professor at the other big university over there, Wake Forest University. She was a close friend of Oprah, and sometimes Oprah would come to town. I wouldn't say that she would remember me, but I sure remembered her.
To build on what you were just saying, um, when I worked at UNC in the library, one of the donor families lived in Maya Angelou's neighborhood. And when they learned that Oprah was coming, they had a whole basement that was a gym. And they knew she liked to work out, and they offered to Maya Angelou to house her, but she turned them down. But what I really was going to ask was originally, how did you happen to draw upon such diverse things for this? I'm really curious about that.
I'm not sure. I think first I thought about the Yukon Territory and Northwest Territory. I traveled there with my parents. Uh, we were doing a road trip across Canada and Alaska, and we visited the Robert Service cabin that was still there. It had been turned into sort of a little museum, and that was in the middle of summer. And this would have been probably in '64, maybe. And Dawson was not a place you really wanted to spend the rest of your life. It was pretty rough, even those days, and that was in the summer. I don't know how those prospectors did it.
I have a question. How did you decide on the word resilience?
I read I read the essay in this Eco-Thero review about resilience, and I thought, that's something we need to think about.
Thank you so much for coming and reading.
Thank you.
We've had Maureen read for us before, and she's always been a popular reader. And I would like to invite others of you who might be interested to contact me, Carolyn Cohn Weaver. I'm in the lookbook, and we have November and December scheduled, all ready to go. And we will be meeting on Thanksgiving Eve and on Christmas Eve, but we will not be meeting on New Year's Eve because they're going to be setting up for a party in here, so you'll probably come for that too. But 2026 is on the way, and Roxana took a deep breath because she's going to be one of our readers. But really and truly, think about it. Think about people who you know who would be interested in coming to the readings. They're announced each week in the Forest Forward, and it's been a long time. Got another question, comment?
Way Off Broadway will be having one of the Wednesday sort of readings, correct? In November. What's the date? November 19th. You want to get that on your calendar. Surely it will be reprising one of the stories that we used 2 years ago.
We all know Sanford. Sanford has written quite a piece as a sort of a welcome and invitation to the new Terraces people. Thanks for that. He'll still open the curtain, though.
It's on November 19th, I believe, Wednesday. It will be part of this program.
I just want to say thank you, Maureen, because that was very moving, and I think it's really going to stick with me.
Good. Resilience is good.
Did I see somebody else?
I could hear you very well, and I could hear everybody here, but I couldn't hear from Oakdale. Do you know why that is? Would you check? Because I could hear you speak distinctly.
Did anybody else have problems hearing Maureen speak? The question about this mic is it's usually in a holder, and when somebody moves their head from side to side, you see what happens. And when you read, you're doing this. The microphone that she has on her head is right here by her mouth all the time. And the other thing about using this is when you're reading, you can't turn the pages while you're still holding this in your hand. Thank you for coming. See you next Wednesday. We're going to be having the ghosts and ghoulies from Halloween next week.